I hope you're staying nice and warm where you are. It's been so cold and very windy here in southeast Queensland for us. We normally don't get the winter winds until August, but I have noticed that the last few years they've been starting a little bit earlier. So one of my July garden jobs is to repot all of my pots and containers. I'll be the first to admit that I am really terrible at looking after things that grow in pots long term. I have a terrible track record, particularly with indoor plants. I've been putting off this project because we are in the midst of rejigging our yard and I wanted to get some really nice pots when I figure out where I'm going to put them. But it has been a long time since I've repotted and I could tell that the blueberries were in dire need of it. I like to do it every 2 years, but I think it's probably been about 3, so it's very much long overdue. When it comes to potting soil, I don't really have a preference. I've not found a good quality organic potting mix that is readily available. Nothing that I could recommend. So I usually buy the best quality that I can get my hands on and then I mix it with some pine bark to make it stretch. Don't ever bother with the cheap stuff. You may as well rip your plants out. So go for really good quality. I have raspberries growing in this rainbow pot. It's actually one of those big blue plastic barrels that has been cut in half. I find it to be one of the best things to grow in terms of containers. It's just such a great size. There are generally 2 types of raspberries, one that fruits on year-old canes and then there's one like this one that fruits on the fresh canes. So I'm safe to give this a really, really good cut back. Surprisingly, it still has leaves. Normally for this time of year, it would be fully bare. I'm not going to fully repot the raspberry this year. I'm just going to give it a top up and I'll add it for my list next year. Now this orange tree. We've got a bit of damage from leaf miner. I don't worry too much about leaf miner as it doesn't really affect much. It's just sort of the way it looks. But you can spray the new leaves with an eco oil if you want to avoid it. So just as the new leaves are forming, that can usually keep it away. I have no idea what type of orange tree this is. My daughter brought home a seed from daycare when she was about 3 and told me that I had to plant this orange because it was so yummy. So I planted it and it grew and somehow it has managed to stay alive. I know citrus don't necessarily grow true to type from seed, but this tree has sentimental value now. My daughter is now 8, so I'm kind of hoping it will flower soon and we'll get to find out. Honestly, it's been pretty resilient, so even if the fruit are terrible, I might try my hand at grafting onto it, which is something that I've been wanting to do. I'm upgrading this to a slightly bigger pot. As you can see, it desperately needed it. Now for my sad looking herbs. Honestly, I try and plant them in the garden these days. They're great space fillers. They kind of grow in amongst all of the veggies really well. But I do have a small supply that I have easy access to. As you can see, the thyme did not handle being neglected and the bay tree is hanging on, barely. I thought the oregano or oregano, however you want to say it, was a goner, but it did bounce back. You've probably noticed that I put a bunch of wood chip mulch in the base before I put any potting mix in. This is just to help with drainage. I find that if you put potting mix straight in the bottom, it tends to clog the drainage hole. So I trimmed back the oregano and to help with the transplant, I'll throw the leaves into the dehydrator. They say that late winter prunings have the strongest flavour. I was brutal with the bay tree. I actually did this to our olive tree a couple of months ago and it has bounced back even better than before. So I'm hoping that we will get a similar outcome. We'll see. But the leaves that I've gathered from this, I'll take to the kitchen. They're fine to use. It's probably about a 10 years supply for us anyway. Mint is one that I'll never plant in the ground as it will just take over. So this lives in a pot under our tap. So it was in pretty good condition. It survived the neglect because it was getting regular water whenever we turned the tap on. It wasn't looking too bad, but once I emptied the pot, I realized that it had a huge ant's nest living in it. And I was really surprised because it was so wet. It had these big gold ants and it really was a miracle that I wasn't bitten, to be honest. So I put the repotting of the mint on hold to let them disperse as the water wasn't deterring them at all. Next up are the blueberries. I gave this one a pretty heavy prune as I wasn't keen on how it was just growing really tall. I'd like it to get a little bit more bushier. It also hadn't started to form any of the buds yet like the other ones that we've got growing. It's likely that this is going to affect the fruit production this year, but I'm okay with that. Now, this first one broke me, and it made me thankful that I hadn't already gone out and invested in new, large, heavy terracotta pots. It was in there tight. It was like it was fused to the side of the terracotta pot. So obviously it was well and truly overdue for a repot. Check out these roots. It was seriously like a mat of felt. I was brutal with trimming them back, and I probably could have gone a little bit harder, but hopefully it does recover well. I'm a bit anxious about that. I popped the offcuts in the aquaponics, and hopefully we can get some roots on them and have some new blueberry plants. Now the other blueberries were starting to bud up, so I only removed the dead branches that I could see. The second and third blueberries weren't too bad. The fourth one has a lot of dead branches. I removed a few, but I think I'll wait until it has stopped fruiting before I give it a really good prune. I'd love to put these in the ground, but I really just don't know how that they would cope with our clay soil. So if any of the cuttings take, I will experiment with putting them in the ground and see how they go here. Our little kumquat is another one that gets neglected but still manages to produce fruit. I haven't found any good uses for the fruit. I've tried jams and chutneys, but no one tends to eat it. So if you've got any good ideas of how to use the fruit, let me know. So I started here with stripping the fruit off, and then I went in to give it a bit of a tip prune, and I realized there wasn't much to prune. It was definitely in survival mode. I knew this one did have an ant's nest in it. I had seen them around before, but thankfully it was only a small one with the little black ants. They moved on pretty quickly once I put the water on them. So checking back in on the mint, it was still covered in ants after a couple of hours, so I left it there overnight. I almost gave up on it and I was just going to take a few cuttings and start over, but they did eventually move on, and I repotted the mint back into the same pot. I ran out of potting mix for my olive tree, but after the backbreaking work of repotting those big heavy pots, I'm reconsidering what we use moving forward. We aren't getting any younger, and that was a lot of work. I thought of using maybe some air pruning pots just to help keep the plants a little bit happier, but I'm just not sure of their longevity, and I also want something that looks a bit nicer and better than our mishmash of pots of what we've got going on. After I was done with my brutal hacking of all of my potted plants, I watered them in with some seaweed emulsion and some micro gold. I will report back on the progress in my monthly tours just so you can see the outcome of how they've handled this repotting. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.